An exclusive convo with new LSU edge rusher Jack Pyburn. You'll hear it next. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So please do that. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Tigers continue their bowl prep, and there is a new face around. DJ Pickett working out with the Tigers. We'll talk about that. Two more Tigers announced they will play in the bowl game. We'll talk about their potential impact on New Year's Eve. But I want to start with Jack Pyburn, who, by the way, LSU fans are absolutely going to love. You are going to fall in love with this guy over his 1 year in Baton Rouge. If you're not familiar, Jack Pyburn is the defensive edge out of the University of Florida. He's entering his fourth year of senior season, so he will be a true senior. He did not redshirt, so he played 3 years at the University of Florida. During his time at Florida, he continued to improve each year during his time there in Gainesville. The one thing, however, that Jack Pyburn did not do there in Gainesville really is rush the passer. But he was an effective run-stuffing edge defender for the Florida Gators. But as you'll hear in our conversation with Jack Pyburn, he wants to be much more than that. In 2022, as a freshman, played in 8 games, made just 3 tackles. In 2023, as a sophomore, played in 9 games, was injured, which cost him the remainder of the season, made 17 tackles. This year as a junior, played in all 12 games, made 60 tackles, 4 TFLs, 1 sack. So when he came back off the knee injury, had a massively productive season. But as you'll hear Jack Pyburn say point blank, is he wants to go from good to great. And you'll hear that coming up. But had a chance to visit with Jack Pyburn on my radio show after further review in an exclusive 15-minute conversation. Always encourage you want to hear the whole thing. You can catch it out. Just search After Further Review, AFR LSU on YouTube or podcast. You'll find it there. But I wanted to pull out a couple of sound bites from Jack Pyburn in this conversation that I think you're going to enjoy, that we can sort of dissect here. One of them starts off with why, when he had so many suitors, ultimately did a kid from Florida who plays for the Gators pick LSU.
Yeah, I'll tell you, number one is I just want to play for a team that fits me a little more in the scheme. You know, I was looking to play for an aggressive 4-down defense, and that's something that Coach Baker at LSU is 100% running. You know, he runs an attack-style defense that is trying to get after the quarterback, trying to create negative plays. So it was really about just trying to find a place where I'd be able to showcase my talents to my best extent and be able to earn opportunities, you know, in every regard on the field and not just be labeled as a first and second down player.
There was
I felt
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I felt at Florida that I was stuck in a rotation with 2 other players that, you know, I had, you know, if you look at the production, look at the numbers, you know, the stats just didn't line up with my snap count compared to the 2 guys that I was starting over. And so I just wasn't too interested in being stuck in a 3-man rotation at Florida, no matter, you know, how much part of me wanted to be there. You know, I felt honestly I had to make a decision for my future that would be beneficial, you know, my interest to make it to the National Football League.
It's pretty clear. And there was a lot of conversation about Jack Pyburn when he entered the portal, because there was a tweet, and I did ask Jack about this, by the way. There was a tweet that went circulating about how, and I believe it was Zach Abelverdi, who's a well-known Florida reporter, who listed a bunch of demands maybe that Jack Pyburn had. And one of them was $45,000 a month, guaranteed to play on third down, et cetera. It's a guarantee to be a starter. Well, Pyburn actually replied to that. He said, why would I ask to guarantee to be a starter when I'm already a starter? And as far as the money, I was told he actually got less at LSU than that reported ask of $45K a month at the University of Florida. But it's pretty clear when you sort of read between the lines and the context clues with what Jack Pyburn wanted. Florida didn't let him rush the passer. He was very good against the run. They'd have him turn sometimes in coverage. Like, I'm looking at his snap counts on the season. 318 defensive line, 2 in the box, 14 as a slot corner, 59 special team snaps and kick coverage, 58 in punt coverage, 22 in punt return, field goal, extra point, 20. So he played a ton on the defensive line, but not necessarily coming off the edge and to rush the passer. So if you're a guy who's thinking, if I want to project to the next, let me put it to you this way, and to reverse engineer this in a way that LSU fans may understand. Harold Perkins was an elite edge rusher early in his career, but wanted to prove he could play off the ball and be a good run-stuffing linebacker as well, so that way he would be a 3-down linebacker in the NFL and not just a 3rd down or situational pass rusher. Well, LSU tried to make Harold Perkins an off-ball linebacker. It didn't work. But that's what he wanted to do to prove to the next level he could do it. Well, at the University of Florida, it's pretty clear the Gators were not going to give Jack Pyburn that opportunity to be an edge rusher. Now, I don't know if he's a double-digit TFL guy. I have no idea. I know I know the guy can play in the SEC. He's a 60-tackle guy. He's a maniac. He's a menace, a guy that everybody loves when he's on your team and hate when you have to play against him. I love the fact that in part of the conversation, he just said, honestly, I just can't wait to put my working boots on and get back and play ball, because all I do is play football. I love that component of it. I mean, every great defense needs a Jack Pyburn on their defense. And I feel like you've got 2 of them now with Jack Pyburn and Whit Weeks, dudes that play with their hair on fire and are just heat-seeking missiles. And I think that is sort of an infectious part of what he might bring to this defense. So that's number one. Why he picked LSU is pretty obvious. He wants the opportunity to be an every down defensive end and not just a 1st and 2nd down player who comes off the field on 3rd down and isn't allowed to rush the passer. Now, he's got competition. They got real competition, because you got Jamari Butler, you got Patrick Payton, you got Gabriel Relaford. You might have Harold Perkins coming back as well. He's got competition for those spots, but he'll have the opportunity to win those reps. Now, this clarifies it a little bit more, because I asked him sort of about the objective and how Blake Baker and how Kevin Peoples see Jack Pyburn fitting into the LSU defense in 2025. This is very telling.
The goal is to be a 3-down defensive starter for the Tigers this year, and allow myself to work to the best of my extent. And honestly, I was also looking for a coach that I felt like could develop parts of my game that I know need to be focused on. For instance, my pass rush. I'm an effective pass rusher, but I want to be an elite pass rusher. And in being an elite pass rusher, you have to have an elite coach that can turn you into the product that you want to be. And just off of Coach Baker and especially Coach Peoples' pedigree, they put a lot of guys into the league that they've developed, into higher round picks. So I saw it as potential to increase my stock and become a better player. And
there's no question. Kevin Peoples did that at Missouri when his 2 seasons there, he had 1st-round draft picks at his position group. And then it's also no secret that Blake Baker wants to be aggressive. One of the stats they look at is havoc rate. It's not so much necessarily just, where you rank total defense and things like that. I mean, for example, Florida defensively had 38 sacks this year. LSU had 33. So Florida had more sacks as a team than LSU in 2024. But for Blake Baker, it's how do you get the sack, the TFL, the deflected pass, the batted ball, the interception? How do you create the negative play for the offense? And that's really what you thrive on. It's not necessarily that you're going to limit a team 100 yards below their season per game total. It's how do you create havoc in the moments, and that's what Jack Pyburn wants to do. So we'll see if he can do it. By the way, he also told me his family has a camp in Louisiana, so he's a big outdoorsman, hunting, fishing, spends a lot of time in Louisiana. So coming to Baton Rouge is not going to be unfamiliar to him whatsoever. And that's going to be a guy that you're going to be thrilled to have wearing the purple and gold instead of playing against him in Tiger Stadium coming up next fall. Jack Pyburn. Again, if you want to hear the entire conversation, just search AFR LSU on YouTube or a podcast. You get the entire conversation with Jack Pyburn. LSU also announced on Monday, forgive me, days are running together, it's holiday week, y'all, on Monday, that a couple of more veteran players will play in the bowl game against Baylor. We'll talk about their impact next. Locked in LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets. You heard me right. If your first $5 bet wins, FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. It is thrilling. Those prop bets are there for you. Tons of them at FanDuel. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Something I guess that's kind of in vogue now for LSU is these announcements of players that are going to play in the bowl. It used to be that if a player was declaring early for the draft, maybe you'd have a press conference. I remember back in 1997, after the 97 season, Alan Faneca having a tearful press conference where he announced his LSU career was over. He'd be heading to the draft. Obviously, a great decision. Became a first-round pick and a Hall of Famer. Jamarcus Russell, after 2006, announcing that he would be, in fact, declaring for the draft. Another great decision. Went #1 overall. I remember that press conference as well. Jamarcus Russell was wearing a suit and had a silver Nike swoosh lapel pin. An indicator, certainly, of what was to come. But what we're starting to see now, of course, you'd have social media draft declarations when people are going pro, or maybe even guys announcing they're coming back. But in the modern age of college football, where you have guys entering the transfer portal, there's this one window of time where ultimately guys are making draft declarations, transfer portal declarations, and whether or not they're returning for another year of school. Why not declarations about playing in the bowl game? So one thing LSU has done, which is pretty clear, is if a player is leaving, they announce that with a graphic. Will Campbell, Emory Jones, Mason Taylor, Kyron Lacey, all announce that with a graphic on social media. If a player is staying, they get a video. We can go back to the LSU gym team with Olivia Dunn and Haley Bryant and those that announced they were running it back at LSU. They all did this video series where they were released sort of one every day. And look at what LSU's done. Garrett Nussmeier coming back, he got a video. All the players that are electing to play in the bowl game, they all get a video. So on Monday, there were two more that we got to see, and that was Miles Frazier and Savion Jones, both announcing they are returning. Well, let me rephrase, not returning. They will stay and play in the bowl game. Now, this is no secret because we've had reports from people who've been out at practice, and there's even been some practice video that LSU has released, so we've seen some of this. But for Frazier and Jones, I think they're both significant for their own reasons. Miles Frazier, I think, is massively significant because LSU had struggles on the offensive line this year, not in pass protection. They were great in pass protection for the most part all year. Run blocking was an issue, something we've talked about a ton. But you go into this bowl game and you've got Garrett Nussmeier, who the last time we saw him, he was coming back after writhing in pain after having that shoulder injury that we all thought was separated shoulder, broken clavicle, something like that. And so now you have Nussmeier, who's coming back for another season. You're paying him a 7-figure NIL deal to come back. Your hopes for next season are all pinned on Garrett Nussmeier. You're playing this glorified exhibition in the Texas Bowl against Baylor, And it's fair to say who's going to be blocking for him. Now, we've seen the practice video, so it's no surprise that Frazier's playing. He's playing right tackle. We've seen the practice video that LSU's released. And Brian Kelly, last week when he met with reporters, even disclosed that Frazier's playing right tackle. So it's no secret. It's not like anything was announced in this video. It's probably more of just a hat tip and homage to a veteran player who stayed for his senior season, is going to play in the bowl game. Fine. But we knew already Frazier was going to play right tackle, where he's played right guard his entire time. The 3 years at LSU, he's played right guard. So your line left to right is going to be Tyree Adams at left tackle, Paul Mabenga at left guard, DJ Chester at center, Bo Bordelon at right guard, and then Miles Frazier at right tackle. If you're wondering, Frazier did play tackle at FIU. So he got to FIU in 2020 in the COVID year. And then in 2021, he played every game and was the starting left tackle for FIU in 2021. And by the way, he was a freshman All-American as a left tackle at FIU. Came to LSU in 22. Of course, Will Campbell was the left tackle. So Frazier played right guard for 3 years. Campbell at left tackle, Emory Jones at right tackle. But this is a guy who played an entire season and was a freshman All-American as a starting left tackle at FIU. So while he hasn't done it in 3 years, he's certainly shown he's capable at the college level of playing tackle. And it's also worth noting that Miles Frazier has been among your best pass blocking offensive linemen all season. So that's something that you can't really ignore, because while this team had issues run blocking, like I'm looking at the Pro Football Focus grades right now, Miles Frazier was your highest graded pass blocking player on the entire team. Miles Frazier's pass blocking grade for the season was a 90.3. Garrett Dellinger, 86.4. And then Caleb Jackson was next, but he only played 119 snaps total. He had 16 pass blocking stats. So of your linemen, Frazier, Dellinger, then Will Campbell had an 82.1 grade. Emory Jones was a 66.7 pass blocking grade. So all that to say, Miles Frazier was your best pass blocking offensive lineman by a wide margin. He's played tackle already at the college level, and I don't think there's going to be much problem, especially when you give him a month to prepare for this game, to kick out and play right tackle. So Tyree Adams at left, Miles Frazier at right, DJ Chester at center, Paul Mabenga at left guard, Bo Bordelon at right guard. See how it goes. Just keep Garrett Nussmeier upright in this ball game. I don't think they're going to pave the way for a 250-yard rushing offensive attack or anything like that. Just protect your greatest asset, which is Garrett Nussmeier. And then there's Savion Jones, who also announced on a video that LSU released that he will return for the bowl game. And this is, again, something we knew, that Braden Swinson, Savion Jones were also going to play in the game. And the hat tip to Savion Jones is the fact that every year he was at LSU, he continued improving. So as a freshman in 21, played in 11 games, made just 3 tackles. Sophomore in 2022, played in all 14 games, started 3 times, made 11 tackles. Last year, 2023, started every game, made 33 tackles. Forgive me, he went from 23 as a sophomore to 33 as a junior, with 3.5 TFLs and 2.5 sacks, to this year as a senior, 36 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. So again, his season by season tackle total, 3, 23, 33, 36. You're talking about a guy that improved every year that he was in Baton Rouge. And having Savion Jones and Braden Swinson and Paris Shand and very likely Gio Paez, although we're waiting on that draft video announcement as well. But you're effectively going to have your entire defensive front there, except for Deshaun Womack. So, and JVR Suggs, who gave you some snaps on the interior as well. But it's going to benefit LSU having this veteran presence defensively against a good Baylor offense, which averaged nearly 35 points a game. Again, we'll talk much more about the LSU Baylor game as we get closer to it. But defensively, the only starting player who's not going to be there for you is Sage Ryan. So very likely you'll see Deshaun Spears go start at safety. I guess we're still waiting on decisions from or announcements from Major Burns and Gio Paez. But assuming they play, then really the only key contributor defensively not there is Sage Ryan, which means Deshaun Spears starts. I'm also assuming Greg Penn and Josh Williams. I know they're playing in the game, but I'm assuming we'll get a video announcement that they're playing soon as well. But you'll have your entire defense except for Sage Ryan. Offensively, you'll have roughly half your starters and a lot of your contributors there as well. But having Miles Frazier protecting Garrett Nussmeier and playing tackle is a big boost for the Tigers as they head into the bowl game. By the way, as LSU heads into this bowl game, there's also a new face getting reps on the defensive side. And this should fire up every LSU fan. We're talking about that to wrap up next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. If you want to be in that number when LSU takes on Baylor in the Texas Bowl, Game Time can make it happen. Not just football and sports tickets as well, but concerts and theater and comedy and anything that you love to watch live. Game Time can get you there, and Game Time will always guarantee you the best price. Remember, if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. They also offer job loss assurance. They have event cancellation protection where you get an automatic full refund for events that are canceled, not rescheduled. They even have 24-hour return guarantee. You can return your tickets within 24 hours from the time of purchase for a full credit to your Game Time account with no questions asked. It's Game Time. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. While we spent a lot of time talking about the veterans who will play in the bowl game, it is certainly notable that a newcomer is getting reps in advance of this bowl game as well. On Monday, LSU released a video on its social media account of a defensive back wearing number 3. Well, we know this season Sage Ryan was a defensive back wearing number 3. However, Sage Ryan jumped in the portal and he is now signed with the Ole Miss Rebels. That number 3 is true freshman DJ Pickett. Now, it is hard not to think of a little nostalgic moment from 6 years ago when, leading up to the 2018 Fiesta Bowl, an early enrollee cornerback was working out with the team in those bowl practices. And boy, was he turning heads early. A guy that had just stepped out of the Louisiana high school football playoffs onto the field at LSU, going through bowl practices with a team getting ready to play in the Fiesta Bowl. And that was Derek Stingley. Now, a lot of people asked then if Derek Stingley could play in the bowl game. And the answer then was no. And if you remember in that Fiesta Bowl, most people in that Fiesta Bowl remember one thing. Most people remember the hit that the big kid from UCF put on Joe Burrow, the blindside block that sort of is credited for awakening the sleeping giant in Joe Burrow. What you may not remember about that game is there were a ton of opt-outs. There were opt-outs, and you had injuries, and then you had a defensive back also ejected for targeting early in that game. I remember they were working out offensive linemen with the defensive linemen just so they have bodies. Like the defensive line position group at tackle was like 3 guys. I mean, LSU was bone dry as far as depth, and the thought was, could Stingley go play? Well, the answer was no. So and the same is true here with Pickett, because a lot of people saw that video. People have asked me, hey, could Pickett play in the bowl game? No. So when you begin the season, and when the semester starts and you begin the season, your roster is your roster. And it does make sense when you think about it. Because what would stop any team in the college football playoff from using this period then as free agency? You know, if you were allowed to get guys to join your team, now you'd have to wait till the transfer portal window is open, and that doesn't open until early December. And so it would be after the regular season and the conference championship games. But if you were in a 12 team or maybe eventually 14, 16 team college football playoff, whatever it may look like, what would stop you from looking at any guy in the portal and saying, oh, I can go get him now, bring him in and help me win? Look, professional sports do that. It's at the trade deadline. Gosh, I remember, I mean, this is a little bit of a deep cut, but in 2016, the New York Yankees at the trade deadline traded Aroldis Chapman to the Chicago Cubs. And the Cubs had him as a rent player for the remainder of the season, won the World Series. Chapman hit free agency, signed back with the Yankees. They basically rented Chapman to the Cubs for their playoff run, and it worked. So in theory, it would work the same way, but it's not allowed. So no. DJ Pickett cannot participate in the bowl game, but he can practice. And I do believe, you've heard me say before, if you are an everydayer, and thank you if you are an everydayer for being here every day on Locked On LSU, but the benefit of a bowl game is no longer the game. It's not about a win to get you to 9 or 10 wins or anything like that. Now, for coaches, there's incentives in their contracts and all, but that's irrelevant to you and to me in the grander scheme. The point and the benefit of a bowl game are the dozen extra practices, because now you get a dozen extra practices with guys who are very likely for the first time stepping into a role as a starter, a leadership role, or in the case of a guy like DJ Pickett, just now onto a college campus. So think about it. A year ago, this is the example I love to give. A year ago, when Jaden Daniels opted out of the bowl game, because you had Garrett Nussmeier coming back, you had a dozen bowl practices where Garrett Nussmeier took every practice rep with the ones. Garrett Nussmeier took every rep, calling the play in the huddle, looking at checks at the line. Like that experience was invaluable, and then got to go play a game. All that before your 15 spring practices and a spring game, and then before fall camp. So yes, these dozen bowl practices are super consequential. So now for a guy like DJ Pickett, you go through these bowl practices, and then by the time obviously he's enrolled, he's going maybe through intersession right now before the semester. Now when you get to spring ball, you've already done it. You've worn the uniform. You've gone into the locker room. You know what the stretch routine is like. You know what the practice drills are like. You know what the expectations are. It's all about repetition and making things more comfortable. So even better for a guy, a 5-star number 1 corner in America who has eyes on a starting job against Clemson, game 1 up there in Clemson, South Carolina, to start 2025 on August the 30th. And this just gives him a jump start. It's for so many years we talked about the early enrollees, guys, to be able to go through spring and how much of a benefit that is, as opposed to showing up in June and trying to get ready to play at the end of August or beginning of September. Now, I mean, it's December. I mean, Pickett just signed a couple of weeks ago, and he's already practicing with the team, and then he'll have a full spring, and then he'll have summer workouts, and then he'll have fall camp. I mean, it's going to feel like he's been here a year. He will have almost been here a year by the time they tee it up and kick it off against Clemson. So you accelerate that learning curve. Very exciting. Go check out that video on any of LSU's social medias. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. As I always remind you, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comment below. So thank you so much for that. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.